What an alien revealed to a broken mechanic about why Jesus came to earth will shake everything you believe. Before this story is over, you will question every sermon, every doctrine, and everything you were ever told about faith, prayer, and the true purpose of Jesus Christ. But you need to listen until the end. Because what happened to Eli Turner alone on his West Texas property on a cold night didn't just change his life. It could change yours. If you've ever wondered why your prayers sometimes feel ignored, if you've ever asked why Jesus had to come in flesh, if you've ever wondered if the church may have missed something, this account will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about the Savior. So before we begin, hit subscribe and activate the bell, because stories like this don't just inspire, they reveal truths that were hidden in plain sight. Now, let's go back to the night Eli Turner would never forget. In Nolan County, the world moves slow enough to hear your regrets echo. The mornings start with Folgers in a chipped mug, and a weather radio that never quite shuts up. Dust coats the windowsill, and the wind whips at the trailer's aluminum siding like a reminder. There's nowhere to hide on the open plains. Every gust rattles the screws. Every gust sounds like something trying to get in. On the kitchen table sits a stack of bills held down by a socket wrench. Mortgage overdue. VA payment plan for the stent in his chest. Utilities warning of disconnect. The numbers bleed together until they feel like one long accusation. Every envelope demands something. He no longer has money, certainty, hope. He used to fix other people's problems. Now he can't fix his own. Out behind the trailer sits the only place that still respects him, the barn. A battered DeWalt cart stands at the center like an altar, tools arranged with reverence earned through decades of honest labor. Craftsman wrenches. Oil-stained manuals. Every dent tells a story of something broken that he managed to bring back to life. Everything except his family. His son's absence is a silence loud enough to hear. The phone never rings. Birthdays pass without a word. He pretends it doesn't matter. But every time a truck engine hums down the county road, he stops waiting, hoping before the sound fades into distance and disappointment. He tries prayer some nights, sitting on the edge of the bed staring at a Bible whose pages are worn from years of pleading. The highlighter marks don't mean anything anymore. The promises feel like someone else's story. Faith used to be a safe place to land. Now it's a room he stands outside of, hand on the doorknob, unable to turn it. He holds on to the land because it's all that hasn't walked away. 10 acres of stubborn Texas dirt, stretching far enough that no neighbor's voice can reach him. Mesquite brush, faded fence posts, a rusting propane tank that hisses when the temperature drops. The property doesn't offer comfort, but it doesn't lie to him either. At night, when the wind goes still, he sometimes imagines he can hear the past, his father teaching him how to wire a switch, telling him to fix what you can reach. But what he needs to fix now is so far beyond his reach it might as well be another world. The weather radio crackles again. Another storm watch. It's been chirping warnings for days, announcing a front that refuses to arrive, like something's holding its breath. Out here, there are no miracles, just debt, dust, and a sky that never answers back. Yet tonight, the sky is already changing. Something is coming. Something that will make every unanswered prayer feel like a setup. There comes a moment when a man realizes he's praying to his own echo. The kitchen bulb hums overhead, flickering just enough to irritate, never enough to fail. On the counter sits a Bible softened by use, corners curled, pages warped from the touch of hands that used to believe those words held power. He opens it one more time. Not out of faith, out of habit. The words swim, not because his eyes are tired, but because belief requires a strength he no longer has. The verse he lands on feels hollow. He waits for conviction, for warmth, for anything. Nothing comes. Across the table, the bank's letter has absorbed a perfect brown circle from his coffee mug. The stain covers one word: delinquent. Maybe that's what he has become. He closes the Bible not gently, not reverently, just closes it, and something inside him closes with it. The prayer he tries to whisper never forms. He realizes he's been praying at the problem, not to God, begging instead of believing. A man can only beg so long before he breaks. He stands, walks to the mailbox, and opens the metal door. It squeaks like it always does, shrill, rusted, accusing, empty. Just like yesterday, just like every day. The wind shifts. For a second, the world holds still. Then, a vibration. Deep. Low. Far away. Not thunder. Not machinery. Something that feels like a heartbeat beneath the ground. He freezes. There it is again, closer this time. The vibration reaches his ribs. His teeth. Something unseen. Approaching with purpose. He looks back at the closed Bible on the counter, and a thought he isn't ready to admit rises like a confession. Maybe the silence was never God ignoring him. Maybe it was God waiting for him to stop begging. The hum intensifies. A frequency. Rising. Something has heard him. Even though he said he was done praying, the storm doesn't arrive gradually. It hits the plains the way truth hits a life that's been avoiding it without permission. A dry-line front slams across the horizon, dragging a wall of bruised clouds that swallow the last light of evening. Wind tears through the mesquite, bending branches as if the earth itself bows to something unseen. The air smells of charged metal and oncoming rain, but there is no rain, yet only pressure. Thick, heavy, expectant. Lightning pulses inside the clouds, not in jagged strikes, but in slow, muted flashes. Not natural, not random. Under the cloud base, a glow forms too clean, too white. The color of hospital halogen, sterile, surgical, intelligent. The barn walls tremble first, not from wind, from vibration. A layered hum crawls up through the dirt, through the concrete pad, through his bones' stacked frequency, like the world is being tuned. Every loose bolt on the metal shelves buzzes. The socket drawer inches open. His heart sinks with the vibration, and for a moment, he can't tell if the sound comes from the storm or from inside him. The microwave clock unplugged since the last power surge flares awake in the dark kitchen window. A green digital number freezes on the screen. 3:16. The hum intensifies. Air thickens. Every hair on his arm stands up like static. A pulse of white spills across the pasture, not bright enough to blind, but sharp enough to erase the stars. The glow spreads outward in a blur, painting the barn rafters and the old DeWalt cart in stark, surgical light. It feels like the world is being examined. The hum gains layers: bass beneath thunder, mid-tone beneath wind, treble inside his skull. It vibrates his ribs like a second heartbeat. Something intelligent moves within the frequency, a pattern that feels like a presence. For one impossible moment, the entire property breathes. Then, silence. No fade out, no diminishing echo, just removed. But the vibration doesn't leave with the sound. It stays inside his chest, inside his bones, inside whatever part of a person registers fear and wonder at the same time. The storm collapses, the glow retracts, and night falls hard and sudden, as if ashamed of what it revealed. He steps backward into the barn, but his body doesn't feel like it belongs to him anymore. The number flashes in his mind. 3:16. The hum has stopped outside, but inside his ribs, the vibration is still alive. Dawn exposes what darkness tried to hide. The storm has vanished without a trace. No rain on the ground, no puddles in the ruts, not even the smell of wet dirt. The land looks untouched, except for the light that still lingers behind his eyes. He steps into the morning cold, boots sinking into damp soil. The pasture is still, too still. Coyotes should be yipping at the tail end of night. Birds should be arguing over territory. Life should be happening, but everything is silent, like creation is holding its breath. Beyond the fence line, the grass changes. A circle, perfect, precise, cuts into the field, 40 feet across. Edges mathematically exact, not burned, transformed. Where the grass should be flattened, it is fused. Where dirt should be visible, it is glass. The surface reflects sunlight like the inside of a blown bottle. No scorch marks, no disturbed soil, no tracks. Not even dew collects on the circle. The closer he gets, the more his chest vibrates. Not fear, not adrenaline, resonance. Something inside him is matching frequency with what sits at the center of the circle. A shard of metal rests on the glassed ground. Not a scrap, not debris. A piece. Smooth, matte, weightless. He lifts it. It's warm, but not from the sun. It's as though it remembers where it came from. He presses a shop magnet against it. Nothing. He places it on his phone. The compass spins like a drunk trying to find north. He steps back, realizes something else. There are no tire tracks, no footprints, no disturbance at all. Whatever made this circle didn't land. It appeared. The wind picks up. And for the first time since dawn, the world moves. Grass bends around the circle but refuses to cross its edge. He stands frozen between terror and awe. If he reports this to the sheriff, the entire county will know by supper. If he tells the pastor, prayer circles will turn into gossip chains. If he tells no one, then the impossible remains his alone. He slides the shard into his pocket and looks back toward the barn. Silence waits. Suspense waits. Choice waits. Should he call the sheriff, the pastor, or no one at all? Night doesn't arrive, it descends. The barn is lit only by a weak fluorescent bulb that flickers like a failing heartbeat. Tools hang motionless along the wall. The shard sits on the red shop rag, glowing faintly, almost breathing with the room. Then the temperature drops, not gradually, instantly. Cold pours across the concrete floor like invisible water. The bulb steadies, then dims. The barn door creaks not from wind, but from something blocking its path. A shape stands in the side doorway, too tall, too narrow, edges shimmering like heat over an asphalt highway. Not human, not monstrous, just wrong enough that the brain fights to categorize it and fails. Light bends around the figure, subtle at first, then unmistakable, as if reality itself is struggling to hold its outline. There are no footsteps, no weight, only presence. Images bloom in the mind without sound. Tent revivals in dirt lots, white canvas flapping, crowds singing until their voices break. Megachurch stages glowing with laser lights and fog machines. A young Billy Graham speaking to seas of faces. A baptism in Nolan County, brown river water, sunburned shoulders. A man believing for the first time. The figure doesn't speak. It imprints. Understanding arrives without language. You fix things, not as compliment, as fact. Another image flashes 3 black SUVs cresting a dusty county road. Government plates, infrared scanners, sweeping fields, rotors beating the air overhead. A search, a hunt. The figure flickers, not fading, injured. Its form destabilizes at the ribs, light struggling to hold shape. Something has gone wrong. Something left it stranded. The temperature drops another degree. The shard on the workbench pulses once. He realizes the visitor isn't threatening him, it's choosing him. And whatever forced it here is now moving closer. The barn becomes a sanctuary and a trap at the same time. The visitor moves farther inside, not walking, just appearing closer, as if distance is irrelevant. The light around its body fractures into thin filaments, like strands of starlight peeling off glass. Inside his mind, information arranges itself without permission, not spoken, placed. A vessel alive, intelligent, buried beneath the pasture, like a heartbeat under skin. Its pulse is weakening, its presence masked only temporarily by the storm. 3 days. That's how long before federal surveillance sweeps detect the heat signature. 3 days before black SUVs stop being a vision and become reality. 3 days before everything changes. The visitor shows him a map, not geographic, but energetic lines of force connecting intention to manifestation. Choice to consequence. Not belief as superstition, belief as function. Jesus didn't come to create followers. He came to teach alignment, not religion. Law. The law that governs what we call faith the way gravity governs falling. A law woven into the fabric of reality. But humanity built institutions instead of understanding instruction. We worshiped the teacher and ignored the equation. If he helps repair the living vessel, the being will show him the full truth. Why Jesus came, what he actually demonstrated, why every unanswered prayer in his life was not rejection, but misalignment, not punishment, interference. His chest tightens, not from fear, from possibility. The barn lights flicker again, unable to decide whether to honor the miracle or retreat from it. His phone buzzes in his pocket, a notification he didn't hear arrive. He pulls it out, a photo from last week, a Whataburger receipt on the floorboard of his truck. He zooms in. Total, $3.16. The number has been following him. Not random, pattern. The visitor's presence expands, not heavier, just undeniable. A choice forms, sharp as broken glass. If he agrees, the world he knows, mortgage notices, empty mailboxes, silent phones will end. If he refuses, the knowledge will vanish with the being, and he will return to ordinary suffering. The shard pulses on the workbench bright, synchronized. 3 days. One truth. He looks from the receipt to the living light in front of him. Nothing about his life has ever been chosen. Until now. He reaches for the shard. The barn seems to inhale, and for the first time in years, so does he. Daylight breaks through thin barn windows, turning dust motes into drifting galaxies. He barely slept. His mind stayed wired to the memory of the visitor's presence. The shard rests on the workbench like a question carved from metal, and then the teaching begins. Not with words, with revelation. For years, prayer felt like throwing desperation into an empty sky. But now, under the dim hum of the shop's ancient fluorescent light, something becomes clear. Faith doesn't work like begging. It works like circuitry, not emotion, alignment. He sees it play out in front of him, not as philosophy, but as function. The visitor shines a soft energy field across the workbench, illuminating every loose wire, every misaligned connection in a system he once abandoned. The energy exposes the truth. Electricity needs a clear path, one that isn't interrupted by rust, corrosion, or broken intention. Prayer is no different. He understands for the first time that intention without action is like a wire cut in half no current can travel through. The mess of his life wasn't because he lacked faith. It was because he waited instead of moved. Belief sat on one side, fear on the other. No bridge connecting them. The visitor shifts the energy field, subtle, controlled until the shop clock on the wall. Dead for months. Flickers. Not from power, from alignment. He never touches the mains, never touches the outlet, only alters the circuit's willingness to carry energy. The clock resets itself. 3:16. A number he didn't seek, but can no longer ignore. Every unanswered prayer rushes back hospital hallways, custody hearings, nights spent staring at a ceiling fan begging for something to change. Now he sees what those moments held. His words carried feeling, but not focus. He wanted outcomes without participation, healing without surrender, reconciliation without vulnerability. The truth stings. Prayer without alignment is noise. The visitor reveals that faith isn't an escape from responsibility, but a partnership with reality, a current that only flows when intention and action are soldered into one clean line. He feels the shame of wasted years, hours spent on his knees, pleading for a miracle while refusing to move his feet. The realization hollowed out something inside him, yet freed something else. A quiet strength rises where exhaustion used to sit. He watches the clock's steady ticking and feels a shift. Faith as a verb, not a wish. The air thins. The visitor's presence fades into a soft shimmer. The barn door rattles in a gust of West Texas wind, snapping him back into the world of deadlines and consequences. Sheriff notices. Mortgage statements. The neighbor. Deacon's Friday wellness check. Tomorrow, the one man in town who watches everything will be knocking at his door. The man who keeps one hand on a Bible and the other in everyone's business. The visitor doesn't warn him with words, just a sensation in the chest, urgency. By morning, truth won't be the only thing coming for him. The morning stretches thin and unreal. He drives into town for bolts, trying to act ordinary, but the world keeps mutating around him. The first sign appears on a county invoice, the total ending in $3.16. He tells himself it's coincidence. Then the radio drops static, clears, and the announcer gives the time. 3:16 p.m. Exactly. He swallows hard. His pulse picks up. He pushes the coincidence away again, too afraid to accept meaning, too shaken to reject it. Miles later, on the county highway, he sees it. Mile marker 316. The three signs fall into place like tumblers in a lock. Patterns aren't accidents. Patterns are invitations. A realization comes not from the visitor, not from logic, but from somewhere deeper. Proof rarely arrives in thunder. It arrives in whispers that stack until silence becomes impossible. By the time he reaches the driveway, the air feels different, not electrified, expectant. He steps into the barn. The shard pulses once in greeting. The vessel beneath the earth waits. He feels something that terrifies him more than the visitor, more than the number, more than the storm. Hope. He agrees to close the barn for the night, convinced the being has left. But when he turns back to the house, a shimmer stands quietly in the corner of the barn, motionless, watching. The visitor was never gone. Small towns don't need evidence to build a story. They only need silence, and an unusual truck parked somewhere it shouldn't be. By sunrise, whispers are already circulating. At the diner, forks pause mid-air when he walks in. Conversation shifts to safer topics: weather, football, cattle prices. No one mentions the storm, no one mentions the hum, but everyone studies him. When the waitress refills his coffee, she sets the pot down too hard. He knows that look. Concern wrapped in fear, wrapped in judgment. Later, a sheriff cruiser rolls down the county road slower than normal, as if checking the property lines for signs of collapse or madness. The deputy inside sees him and raises 2 fingers from the steering wheel, not as greeting, but as warning. That afternoon, the deacon arrives. He never announces himself. He stands on the porch, Bible tucked under one arm, holding the kind of concerned expression that always leads to gossip disguised as prayer requests. He asks if everything's all right. He asks if the wind knocked something loose. He asks if anyone's been visiting. And against every instinct, the mechanic lies. He says everything is fine. The lie tears something he didn't know was still holding him together: pride. He watches the deacon's truck crawl back down the gravel road until the dust settles. He closes the trailer door and leans against it, breathing hard. This is the cost. Not danger, not exposure, isolation. No one here fears the impossible. They fear the person who dares to acknowledge it. As night falls, the wind shifts again, sharp, unnatural. Somewhere beyond the tree line, a low drone vibrates through the air. Not storm, not thunder, something searching. And getting closer, daybreak turns the barn into a cathedral of metal and dust. Light leaks through the high windows, splitting into thin, golden columns that find the face of the mechanic like a spotlight revealing a reluctant disciple. He never asked to learn anything spiritual here, not in a workshop, not surrounded by tools stained with motor oil. Yet the air feels charged, as if the truth has weight. The traveler stands near the far wall, not in form but in presence. Its outline flickers only when he looks away, like something too real for the eye to hold directly. The teaching begins without warning. The world around him dissolves. Suddenly he is standing not in Nolan County but on a narrow road carved through dry earth. Heat presses down from a merciless sun, baking dust into clay. Sandals scuff the ground. The smell of olives and sweat mixes with wood smoke. A man walks ahead, not magnificent, not glowing, just human. His clothing is simple, rough-woven, stained from use. His stride is steady, grounded. Yet every step radiates a force that feels like gravity bending toward compassion. People follow him, not out of fear, but because their hearts know home when they feel it. The mechanic watches this man kneel beside someone, collapsed in the dirt, a body twisted in pain. No ritual, no ceremony. The man places a hand near the injury, and something shifts deeper than bone. No words, only presence. It becomes obvious. Healing is not magic. It is alignment. Mercy moves like voltage. Forgiveness behaves like physics. A misplaced bolt will jam a machine. A wedged resentment will jam a spirit. Connection is the law. The traveler shows the current's literal streams of energy moving between the healer and the suffering man. Not imagined, visible, measurable. The mechanic watches the energy jump like a welding arc from compassion to wound, and the body straightens, breath returning in a sharp gasp. Healing isn't earned, it's allowed. The scene shifts. A small home, clay walls, lamplight flickering. The teacher sits with outcasts, fishermen, widows, the sick. Those who have nothing to offer except presence. The teacher laughs not softly, but freely. Joy fills the air, like warm bread. Love isn't passive. It is kinetic, always moving outward. The mechanic feels his chest ache. For years, he believed God was distant. Here, God sits on the dirt floor and wipes someone's tears. No altar, no hierarchy, no fear, only alignment. He sees the law clearly now, not written on scrolls, but on behavior. Where compassion flows, energy flows. Where judgment blocks, stagnation forms. Where forgiveness is practiced, life returns. Prayer was never meant to convince God. Prayer was meant to convince the heart to open enough for energy to move through. The scene shifts again. A marketplace. Coin tables. Shouting. Greed. Dressed in righteousness. The teacher does not beg for reform. He overturns the tables. Authority without love collapses under its own weight. As the mechanic watches Jesus walk through chaos without losing presence, he sees the real teaching. Love is not soft. Love is structural integrity. The vision jumps, a cross against a blackened sky. But the traveler does not show suffering. Instead, it shows the moment just before death, the instant where forgiveness releases every trapped current. A surge of energy radiates from the teacher's body outward, not upward like shock waves of mercy hitting the world. Forgiveness isn't a sentiment, it's liberation. And in that moment, something horrifying and beautiful becomes clear. The cross wasn't a transaction. It was a demonstration, a blueprint. The barn returns. Dust, tools, concrete. But everything feels different. The traveler's presence intensifies, and the temperature inside the barn rises by several degrees, not from engines or electricity, but from the memory of the truth itself. Heat radiates like revelation. He wipes his brow. The warmth keeps growing, not uncomfortable, alive. The lesson isn't over, and tomorrow could cost him everything. Night brings no rest. The mechanic leans against the workbench as a new stream of visions unfolds. This time not ancient roads, but centuries of human attempts to bottle the unbottleable. He sees a tent revival in the 1,920 seconds. Dirt floor, sawdust air, cheap folding chairs. People cry with the desperation of those trying to outrun their own shadows. The preacher is sincere. His voice cracks. He believes. Then another scene unfolds. Television studios in the 1,960 seconds. Crisp suits, spotlights, choreographed sincerity. Money begins to move alongside faith, and the message shifts from transformation to transaction. Applause replaces reverence. Performance replaces presence. The mechanic watches the progression with growing dread. Each era adds another lock on a door that was never closed. Megachurch architecture rises next: massive screens, fog cannons, strategic lighting calibrated to generate emotional response. The message becomes branded, market-tested, safe. But through every era, he sees something else. Scattered lights. Ordinary individuals who carry the original current. A nurse praying silently over a dying patient without asking for credit. A mechanic fixing someone's car after hours and refusing payment. A widow slipping cash into a struggling single mother's purse without being seen. Quiet saints. Their names will never be recorded. Their actions ripple farther than any sermon. The traveler shows the distortions not with anger, but compassion. Humans wanted structure to protect the message. Instead, the structure suffocated it. The mechanic's throat tightens. The original law of alignment was simple: presence over performance, mercy over measurement, embodiment over belief. But institutions grew afraid of simplicity. Simplicity can't be controlled. Simplicity asks people to transform rather than obey. He sees records, literal archives of missing teachings, moments where the law was almost revealed again, only to be buried beneath commentary, theology, debate. The vision's slow. A final image appears, a key, being placed back in his hands. The traveler is not here to criticize faith. It is here to restore what was lost. Outside, a sound jolts him back into the barn. Rotor wash. Not imagined. Not symbolic. Air pressure trembles through the mesquite trees behind the property, bending their branches in one violent sweep. The barn walls vibrate. Searchlight? No. Not yet. But someone is flying low, practicing the approach. The mechanic's pulse spikes. The visitor watches from the corner, unmoving. And the truth becomes undeniable. Spiritual revelation is dangerous long before it becomes real. The barn goes silent, not peaceful, hollow. He sinks to the concrete floor, hands pressed against the cold slab. The weight of everything he's seen crushes the last defenses around his heart. For years, he blamed God for the silence. Now he sees the truth. God wasn't silent. He was unreachable behind barricades the mechanic built himself. He remembers every unanswered prayer, moments where he gave up, nights when he walked away from belief because surrender felt too expensive. Grief hits first sharp, humiliating, then regret thick as mud. He wasted years demanding a miracle when every tool for transformation was already in his hands. The shard pulses softly on the workbench, waiting. He realizes alignment isn't about deserving. It's about willingness. He isn't sure he has that. A tear hits the concrete. He doesn't wipe it away. The traveler does nothing to comfort him. No image, no revelation, only presence. The kind of presence that refuses to rescue a man from becoming who he was always meant to be. He draws one breath, then another, and another until his ribs stop shaking. Slowly, painfully, he stands. The visitor remains still, not pushing, not pulling, waiting. Because surrender can't be forced, it can only be chosen. In the silence between breaths, he realizes the next move is his, and whatever he decides will rewrite everything. Morning drags across the horizon like a warning. The mechanic steps outside, mug in hand, as frost melts from the fence wire. He can feel pressure in the air before he can name it. Something has shifted. The land that once held silence now holds countdown. On the porch railing lies yesterday's mail. Notices, inspection slips, reminders. One envelope bears the county logo. A scheduled property inspection. Not random, not routine. A visit. Another paper from the VA reminds him of the cardiology appointment in Abilene, the one he can't miss without risking benefits. Benefits he needs to keep the land. Land he now knows is covering something alive. Time collapses inward. Every obligation that once seemed inconvenient now forms a vice around his throat. As if the ordinary world is arriving to collect him at the worst possible moment. He spreads out a map on the hood of his truck. Not of roads. Of surveillance, thermal sweeps, military flight corridors, ground-based vehicle routes. He tracks recent government movements in the area. Black SUVs spotted near wind farms, helicopters smiling above cattle routes, escorted trucks driving slow on back roads where no construction exists. None of this happened before the storm. The pattern is too clean, too deliberate. The visitor doesn't speak, but every time his heart rate spikes, the shard pulses from inside the barn as if responding to his panic. He studies the timeline. The vessel buried beneath his land emits heat. Heat is traceable. Heat invites discovery. 3 days. Today is the second. He feels pulled between two worlds. In one direction, bank letters, inspections, disappointing medical test results, and a town that thinks of him as a cautionary tale. In the other, the visitor, the revelation, the alignment he's learning for the first time in his life. Faith isn't the struggle. Time is. If the government sweep scans this acreage, they will seize everything. Not just the vessel beneath the soil. His land, his tools, his last chance to matter. A gust of wind sweeps across the pasture, bringing a distinct scent jet fuel diluted by distance. Then it happens. A low thump, deep and measured, travels across the plains. Not thunder, not farm machinery. A helicopter. The cattle in the neighbor's lot go silent. The birds stop mid-chatter. The world holds its breath. He steps onto the porch, mug trembling in his grip. Whatever is coming is already closer than yesterday, and today, he has no room left to run. Before dawn, he returns to the barn, not as a mechanic, but as someone learning a language older than scripture. The traveler stands near the buried vessel, barely visible as color instead of form. A soft radiance pulses through the earth, illuminating the metal ribs of the barn with each surge. Today is not about belief. It's about participation. He opens the DeWalt tool chest and lays everything out with reverence. Wrenches, multimeter, spools of insulated wire, objects he once used to fix broken machines, now reimagined as instruments for awakening something alive. He kneels at the hatch in the ground, feeling warmth radiating through the soil. Not heat from friction, heat from consciousness. The vessel's interior blueprint appears in his mind. Not a picture, but a knowing. Instead of circuits, there are pathways. Routes where energy flows only when intention aligns with action. He begins mapping the system, tracing energy lines in the dirt with chalk. Not wires, connections. Every time he doubts, the flow stutters. Every time gratitude enters his chest, the energy smooths and expands. He realizes something profound. Gratitude lowers resistance. Fear constricts it. Electricians call it impedance. Scripture calls it hardness of heart. He works slowly, matching his breath to the pulse beneath the soil. He adjusts one alignment point, and the vessel brightens. He hesitates, and the glow weakens. Faith is no longer a concept. Faith has become voltage. Tools become sacrament. Each motion deliberate, reverent. The shop's old hum joins the rhythm, creating a resonance that feels like a prayer carried through wires. Not spoken, lived. Hours blur. His chest carries both exhaustion and clarity. As he completes the final connection, the vessel responds. Light travels across the ground in geometric patterns, a lattice of intention and physics locking into alignment. For a moment, he feels it all. Every prayer he ever whispered into darkness had always hit something, but bounced off the barriers he refused to release. Forgiveness was never charity. It was clearance. Removal of spiritual impedance. He breathes out, and the energy field stabilizes. In the house, something clicks. He turns to look through the barn window. The kitchen clock, the same one that froze at 3:16 days ago, begins to tick. On its own. No outlet, no wiring, only alignment. The lattice beneath the soil gives one final pulse, then falls silent. Not failure, completion. But before he can celebrate, something else shifts. The wind outside stills. The world goes quiet. He senses the visitor again, not as presence, but as expectation. The repair worked. But the hardest part hasn't happened yet. For the first time in years, the mechanic feels weight lift from his body, not from rest, but from alignment. Proof arrives quietly. When he flips the breaker on a long-dead radio, the speaker crackles. Not with static, but with clarity. A song he hasn't heard in decades slips through the frequency, as if the universe chose nostalgia to prove its point. Then something deeper. His heart gives a strong, steady beat. No flutter, no pain. The vessel beneath the soil pulses again in acknowledgement. Something inside him, something human, begins to believe. But belief always asks a price. Once you see truth, you cannot unsee illusion. Once you witness alignment, dabbling in disconnection becomes unbearable. He walks toward the barn door, ready to breathe in fresh morning air, but freezes. Headlamps sweep across the gravel road. A vehicle idles at the mailbox. Not a neighbor's truck, not a delivery van. Too still, too quiet. Someone is watching. His body reacts with instinct. A lifetime of knowing when danger enters a room. The cost of truth reveals itself in one electric realization. Enlightenment attracts pursuit. Faith isn't safe. He steps back into the barn, pulse hammering, mind racing between two futures. Return to the small life he understood, or step into the unknown, and face whatever waits in the dark. The headlights remain fixed on the mailbox. Silent, patient, unmoving. Someone has come, and they're not here for a welfare check. They're here because something beneath his land is awake. The barn dims, not because the light fades, but because a brighter truth presses through. The traveler stands fully revealed, not in shape, but in intention. A field of warmth radiates outward, bending space. Without disturbing air, the mechanic doesn't hear a voice. He receives understanding, not in words, in knowing. The world dissolves again. Suddenly he is standing inside a memory, older than history. A courtyard of dust, stone walls blocking out heat. A group of ordinary people sitting around a low table. Bread waits in the center. The man from earlier, the one from the dusty road, sits with them. No throne, no ceremony, only presence. Every eye at the table is fixed on him, not because he demands authority, but because he carries peace without effort. He takes the bread, he breaks it, and in that fracture, light passes through. Not metaphorical light, literal. A current. It moves across the table like warmth from a flame, washing over the people seated there, settling not on their skin, but in their spirits. And suddenly everything becomes clear. He did not come to build a religion. He came to show how God looks, when God is lived instead of imagined. The scene shifts. Families on dirt floors learning to forgive each other. Strangers helping strangers without needing thanks. Hands resting on shoulders with no agenda. Alignment. The traveler makes him feel the laws moving behind every action. Love generates flow. Judgment blocks it. Forgiveness releases trapped energy. Not poetry. Physics. Love is not emotional comfort. Love is structural force. A current. Just like electricity, love requires a conduit. Jesus came to teach humans how to become conduits. The mechanic watches the man walk through crowded alleys, touching the sick gently, not to prove his power, but to awaken theirs. A blind child laughs before sight returns. A woman, bent for years beneath shame, stands tall without a word spoken. Bodies change, not because he wills it, but because they finally believe they deserve wholeness. Mercy turns into voltage. Compassion becomes a frequency. Forgiveness clears the blockage. Grace is simply unimpeded flow. The traveler allows the mechanic to feel it. A pulse of healing moves through him, not toward perfection, but toward clarity. He realizes something painful and liberating. Every miracle in Scripture happened because people aligned with the law. He demonstrated. The man in rough cloth didn't ask to be worshipped. He asked to be imitated. The mechanic sees another scene. The moment crowds tried to make Jesus king, he walked away. Power offered without love is corruption. Influence offered without humility is poison. He never built an empire, because empire requires fear to function. He built a practice, a way, God with us, as a lived experience, not a distant idea. He sees the reason for the cross, not to satisfy divine wrath, but to reveal a divine pattern. Love doesn't die. It multiplies, even in pain, even in injustice, especially in surrender. He watches the moment before death. The choice to forgive becomes a release of energy so vast, it ripples across centuries. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is the final form of alignment. The mechanic falls to his knees, not in worship, in recognition. Jesus came to free humans from shame economies, the belief that they must earn worthiness, pay for love, prove belonging. He came to break open the myth that God hides behind requirements. The law was simple. Be the conduit. Let love move through you. Become alignment. The traveler withdraws the vision slowly, leaving one last imprint. Hands breaking bread, light passing through the fracture. As the bread splits open, the barn fills with blinding radiance. Warm, clean, undeniable. The mechanic shields his face, eyes burning. The light sharpens, white and absolute. It blooms until it feels like the whole barn is going to tear apart. Then, darkness, but not emptiness. A presence remains, and the truth keeps echoing. He didn't come to be believed in. He came to be practiced. The night before departure is still. No hum, no visions, no signs. Just an ordinary barn with extraordinary silence. He stands at the workbench, staring at the shard. It no longer pulses. The craft beneath the soil is ready. It will lift by dawn. His part is done. But something inside him isn't finished. For years he lived small, defeated by bills, buried under regret, choked by prayers that never moved beyond fear. He used to ask why God never answered. Now he understands. God wasn't withholding. He was waiting for participation. The man who once felt invisible has become the hinge between worlds. He bolts the barn doors, not to hide anything, but to mark the end of who he used to be. On the workbench lies the Whataburger receipt. The number still visible, 3.16. Not a coincidence. A breadcrumb trail he finally learned to follow. He folds the paper and slips it into his pocket, not as a trophy, but as a vow. Faith isn't passive anymore. Faith is craft. He steps into the cold night air. The stars look closer. The dark feels alive. The land beneath his boots seems to breathe with memory. Whatever happens next, the life he returns to cannot be the life he leaves. In the distance, a low vibration stirs the dust. Then wind rolls across the pasture. Not natural wind, but rotor wash. Something approaches. Not the visitor, not the past. The next chapter. He doesn't know if what's coming is rescue or pursuit. He just knows this. Staying small is now more dangerous than stepping into the unknown. He turns toward the sound, and the door of his old life opens. For the final time.